Sensing that there was more to come, the guest piped down again. When Scott reached over, he finally lifted the top to reveal the groom's cake in all its glory. There were several soft gasps. One of these was from Scott himself, who Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. My name is Death by Pony, and today we're hopping right back in to our life. So without further ado, let's go. Towering impressively over almost everyone else, yet standing awkwardly off to one side, was a man with a gentle face and hair the color of sea glass. Cove, you're here. Hey, Cove Holden. You cupped your hands around your mouth to shout. You rushed over to his side. You carefully picked your way through the crowd. Rushing. You darted into the crowd, making for Cove Holden like he was your lighthouse in a storm. The waves parted, and soon enough you were skidding to a halt, almost crashing right into him. Cove had spotted the movement out of the corner of his eye and lifted his arms as if to steady you. Oh, James! You licked him up and down, admiring his get-up. We're hugging him. Cove had many good qualities, but being premium hugging material was definitely one of the better ones. He had made a small sound before his arms wrapped around you instinctively. When you drew apart again, Cove was regarding you with fondness. Hi, Cove. Hi, James. I missed you. His tenor was soft, full of sincerity. It tugged at your heartstrings to hear it in person again. I mean, I know it's only been not even a week, but it's okay. I missed you too. It was the kind of sensation that you only truly recognize in the instant you gave voice to it. But it was the truth. You'd been missing Cove all the way through his ordeal. This ordeal, not his ordeal. At hearing his feelings echoed back at him, Cove positively beamed. You basked in the shared sentiment for a while, not really speaking, content to simply be together. So how did it go with the preparations and stuff with Baxter, the wedding planning? There was a faint upward tilt in the way Baxter's name kind of like he was unsure he remembered it correctly, though of course that wasn't really the reason. Cove had found it just as hard as the rest of you to believe that your old acquaintance had reappeared, who was still not yet accustomed to including the name in his vocabulary. It's been good. The wedding's gonna be great, and Baxter is, well, Baxter. It's been eventful, yeah. Honestly, it's been a pretty amazing week. Geez, I don't even know where to begin. It's been a pretty good week. Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad. Cove looked delighted and relieved in equal measure. You guess he'd been worried about you. Sweet Cove. Your reunion was cut short by a sudden shift in the surrounding ambiance, and the constant hubbub was rising in intensity, reaching a fever pitch. Something was happening. All around you, people were turning to face the entrance, craning their necks and peering around each other to get a better look. Through the glass doors, you made out a familiar splash of scarlet. There were several appreciative whispers from the congregation. A low whistle came from somewhere nearby, and you overheard a guest announce to his neighbor that the car was a Corvette. Baxter was the head of the assembly, readily waiting to throw open the doors. Two men exited the stylish ride, dressed in even more fashionable suits. The grooms had arrived. You'd peeked at the photographer from their shopping spree, so you'd known to expect, but there was always something different about seeing it in person. When Scott and Jude entered the building, the crowd parted, forming a corridor to let them pass. They would be leading the way back up to the hall from here. The crowd was shepherded into the elevators and stages. Heading back up top, Baxter stayed hard at work directing the incoming traffic, ensuring that everyone promptly found a seat. You and Cove arrived early and snagged a row of four somewhere near the front. Terry and Miranda appeared afterwards and took two of the spares. Soon the elevator door closed, and the last and final few stragglers eased into place. The betrothed were behind everyone, waiting patiently. All at once, everyone could sense it, a hush fell over the crowd. Peering over your shoulder, you saw Baxter giving a curt nod to the officiant before fiddling with a miniature remote. From hidden speakers, you heard an opening bar of music you couldn't play, something measured yet upbeat, and every head in the room swiveled to watch. Scott and Jude walked down the aisle. They were bound for elegant archways and that had been erected right beside one of the enormous windows. As they drew near, the afternoon sunshine haloed them with gold. The music fell silent. All was still. The last 5 days of your lives had been a whirlwind, a long, stressful journey towards the singular moment. You gazed at the joyful faces of the women, of the two men in front of you, and saw none of that. Here at last was the magic to the ritual. They were two figures, radiantly bathed in sunlight. They stood in hand with the other, with the whole world behind them, and had the eyes only for each other. The ceremony itself was brief, with no unnecessary pomps and circumstances, but suffused throughout with the sweetness. The officiant gave a welcome performance, proceeding with open words on the subject of commit of family and love. The exchange of vows and rings immediately followed, promised to be there for one another in good times and in bad. Scott went to first, reading his vows from a little card. Jude did his from memory, his voice trembling with emotion. You tried to focus on every word, but became a little distant by your friends. 2 seats down from you, Miranda was wordlessly dealing out Kleenex to both Terry and Cove, who on cue had begun to weep. She then dabbed at her own face, teary-eyed herself. Thereafter came the candlelight ceremony, a moment of quiet intimacy, save for the odd sniffle. The grooms each lit their own smaller tapers separately before igniting the large unity candle together. One by one, you watched as their hopes for the day were realized. Baxter had been right. The whole thing went off without so much as a hitch. Well, besides the people getting hitched, of course. It went smoothly. In fact, it was nearly over in no time at all. There was one final matter to take care of. With a broad smile, the booming voice of the officiant pronounced the marriage complete. You may now... Oh! There wasn't any point of finishing. The crowd had erupted in cheers before they could get that far. Scott's restraint had held right up to the final moment, but being forced to wait any longer to kiss his husband was a bridge too far. He jumped the gun, and Jude, but it wasn't like it mattered. The hall filled with the sound of laughter, and huge clattering went up as the whole congregation got noisily to their feet. The newly wedded Mr. and Mr. Adam turned to face the crowd and their family and friends. Eyes bright, heads held high, they stood and waved before linking arms and striding back up the aisle. They shook hands and smiled with all the sundry leaning and rowing procession over to the far end of the hall where the reception tables were laid out waiting. Just like that, ceremony was over. It was time to start the party. As the guests began to migrate, the staff hung back and already began to rearrange the space. Chairs were being stacked and wheeled over to the reception area, ready for dinner.
Take care.
Go ahead and enjoy yourselves. I'll take care of things here. Baxter excused himself to assist with the preparations, disappearing into the crowd and leaving you, Miranda, Cove, and Terry to mingle with the other guests. No sooner had you lost sight of him that you spotted the men of the hour waiting through the mass of guests and hands clasped triumphantly between them. Their progress was rather slow. Everyone and their mom wanted a handshake. Eventually, they made it over to where your little group was standing. Scott was bouncing on the balls of his feet, lighter than air. Jude was his usual grounded self, but you could tell he was ecstatic. He raised his hand in a casual wave. Yo! Hey guys! You returned the wave cheerily. You beamed at the pair of them. You tilted your head in their way to acknowledge it. You threw your arms around both of them. I'm a hugger! Whoa! Jude's arms came up to steady you as you barreled into him. On the other side, Scott giggled. Hi Scott, hi Jude. This is such a nice ceremony. Congratulations on your marriage. Now that wasn't so bad, huh Jude? You were happy for them to talk right now. Congratulations. Scott's radiant expression could have powered all of California for a year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, James. It's been hard to keep myself together. I'm just so... He scrunched up his face and squeezed his arms in tight, as if to clamp down on the powerful names and emotions welling up inside of him. You understood even if he couldn't find the word of it. Jude, with one arm still entwined with Scott's, reached over with his free hand and tapped you on the shoulder. Hey, this wouldn't have been the same without you.
I appreciate this.
You can say that again. Thank you so much for your help, James. Take some time to relax and enjoy the reception, okay?
You earned it.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure, and thanks. The pair of them grinned in unison before once more being swept up in the tidal wave of well-wishers and distant relations. For an instant, you were left twiddling your thumbs along with the others. You took a moment to survey your surroundings, the lack of anything better to do. In a far corner of the room, you spotted a conspicuous figure flitting about, a grim-faced lady holding a camera. You recognized her easily. She had been at every single Eckert family event for the last decade or more, dutifully documenting the events for posterity. You wouldn't have put money on her being there while Miranda and Jude were born. In fact, it was hard to imagine her missing any significant occasion. You were relieved she could make it. Eventually, Scott and Jude hugged and kissed or shaken hands with the majority of their guests. Meanwhile, the staff were beginning to clear large empty spaces in the middle of the room, easing the crowd to the walls uncovered in the central floor. With cautious steps, Scott and Jude made their way onto the dance floor, two lone figures as they took their positions as the noise of the guests faded to silence. You saw Jude lean in close to his husband, whispering something to his ear. Scott grinned. Their eyes met, and the music played. It started off slow, with a measured, even tempo. The couple began to move in unison, easing into the dance carefully, their toes teasing to the floor as one might the surface of a frozen pond. The beat began to pick up, though they quickly settled into a polished practice routine. To your left, Harry sucked in an impressed gasp. He wasn't the only one to give his approval. As the couple spun steadily around the space, there were encouraging whoops and a smattering of applause. You could hardly believe those were the same people who only a few days prior would have sworn on their own lives that this was an impossible feat. And now they were taking turns dipping each other to cheers, barely able to contain their joy. From across the room, you noticed Baxter watching with a gentle heartfelt expression on his face. You detected a hint of satisfaction. He was unabashedly proud of his students. You thought his eyes flicked aside to meet yours, although that might have been a trick of the light, the setting sun casting strange shadows. Either way, his features remained unaltered, tender. As the music came to a delicate finish, Scott and Jude maintained their final pose for a second or two before embracing to a more acclaimed from the onlookers. Whew. Scott held Jude's head in both hands, leaning in for a kiss, extra cheering from Terry Cove, averting his eyes a little bashfully. He'd always been the type to get flustered over PDA. The lovebirds took their bows and were then rushed off to take more photos. Now, with the first dance was taken care of, the next order of business was arguably the most important. Food! Terry's voice was easily audible over the growing din of guests milling about once more, and in an instant he was gone, vanishing in the direction of the appetizers. There was a green blur at the edge of the peripheral vision. He looked over to find Cove, or rather, an empty spot where he had been standing there mere moments ago. Nothing was more reliable than Cove's response to what Miranda had once dubbed the F-bomb. The boy must have hollow legs. Maybe that was what made him so buoyant. You exchanged amused glances with Randy before she shrugged and followed alongside the two boys. Might as well grab an appetizer too while there's still some left. It was a party, you had to enjoy what was on offer. Wanting to avoid the worst of the crowd, you went to find somewhere to sit down. You want to scope your seat for the main course. Gotta enjoy what's on offer. You couldn't miss partaking in party food, though of course this was being a fancy grown-up occasion. They call it appetizers, but you knew the truth. There was party food in the end. Not wanting to be left with only the scraps, you hurried after the wake of your friends. Most of the others congregants were taking this opportunity for more socialization with some handfuls breaking away to grab a morsel to munch on while they waited. It was easy to hook back up with your friends nearby, though admittedly, that was never difficult, even at the worst of times. You just had to walk in the direction of an elevated pair of blue eyes. As soon as you caught up to the men, Cove was passing you a small delicacy of some description. Hey James, you should really try this. It's good. Thanks. You took whatever it was and popped it in your mouth and gave a thumbs up of appreciation. You've been right. You immediately leaned over the table and grabbed another. So good. The four of you hung around by the Horse d'Avoirs for a while, swapping stories and reminiscing about the places you'd seen some of the other guests. Terry was with some small degree of pride, recounting the names of Miranda's relatives as they flitted in and out of view. Many of them stopped by to say hello, which was sweet to watch. It was evident that many in Miranda's family already considered Terry to be one of their own, and it didn't escape your notice that Randy was on the receiving end of several meaningful looks. Randy, for her part, was doing an exceptional job of pretending not to notice any of them. She could be very unflappable when the situation demanded. Before you and your friends could totally wipe out the snack table, there was the tinkling sound of a bell rung, which came from the direction of the dining area. This was a signal for everybody to take their places for the main course. Presumably, your little group hurried on over, joining the mass of guests crowding around the tables. Everyone's designated seat was marked with a name card written in flowing gold ink. You spotted yours quickly. You and your friends were near the head of the table. Once the momentary fuss of the seating arrangements was dispensed with, the meal followed along in very short order. A small squadron of wait staff began to set large plates in front of the guests, each laden with food, giving off faint wisps of steam. If memory served, the options were chicken tangy, beef steak, vegetarian ravioli, and a vegan risotto. And actually, you had paid very little attention to the main course, your mind somewhere else. The main was naturally a precursor to what Cove would have described as the most important course of all, dessert. On this occasion, you had to agree with him. You wolfed down your meal in the sense of growing excitement, hardly able to stop yourself from peeking over the top table every now and again. The tiered wedding cake, Xavier masterpiece, stood resplendent at one end of Jude and Scott's table, and next to it, hidden under an unassuming silver cloche. How would it be received? What would Scott think? In your anticipation, you were finding it hard to sit still. It didn't escape Cove noticed that something was up. Halfway through eating, there was a gentle nudge at your elbow. He was looking at you quizzically.
Are you okay?
Is everything okay? He was genuinely concerned, which was both very sweet and rather funny. You flashed him a quick smile and waved it away, not wanting to risk being overheard. During the ceremony and throughout the meal, Baxter had flitted from corner to corner in the room with the delicacy of a honeybee, his presence unassuming and unnoticed by all present, except you. As the main course was being cleared, however, he tapped a fork against the side of a wine glass, and clear sound reverberating off the tiled floors and quieting the diners' discussion. Honored guests, I hope the food and drink has been to your satisfaction. There were some non-specific noises of congruence from the various tables. You glanced at Terry, who patted his stomach contentedly, and Miranda still nibbling away at a piece of bread.
Glad to hear it.
I'm glad to hear that. We've come to the part of the evening where the newlyweds will cut the traditional first slices of their wedding cake. Scott, Jude, if you would like to. The sound of two chairs scraping against the wood floor drowned out the rest of what he said. Scott and Jude got to their feet and came around from behind the top of the table. The two men stood shoulder to shoulder in front of their tiered cake. A large steel knife clutched in Scott's right hand, and Jude rested over the top of his wedding band, winking in the candlelight. There was a momentary pause as the dour-faced photographer performed her solemn, at least to her duty, and then, with relatively little actual ceremony, the first clean cuts were made. The couple appointed a slice apiece, and a promise that there was no smushing of cake into anybody's face. A round of applause rippled around the tables as the first bites were taken, and then a bustling sound as people started getting up from their queue. Scott was limbering up to the carved slices for everybody when Jude tugged at his sleeve and stopped him with a word. He gestured to the silver cover, still hiding whatever was underneath. Sensing that there was more to come, the guest piped down again. When Scott reached over, he finally lifted the top to reveal the groom's cake in all its glory. There were several soft gasps. One of these was from Scott himself, whose face was blown wide with a surprise and delight. He smiled open-mouthed, looking silently to his husband, and back down at the controller cake. It's so nice. I didn't know what it was going to individually look like, but that is an Xbox controller. Yeah. With that shape, it's too beefy and round to be a PlayStation controller. And the setup of the buttons, gotta be Xbox. I should know. I love PlayStation. PlayStation is my favorite. My boyfriend's preferred one, Xbox. So when I go to his house, we play on Xbox. And I have to hold this beefy controller. I would know. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, hit like. That way I know you're enjoying the content I'm making. Hit subscribe. That way YouTube brings you back Here's Happens Next. I won't take up any more of your time. Have a good day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.